The second thing that I've seen entrepreneurs and smaller brands do is fall into the trap of wanting to change because they think that they have to change things. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And sometimes you see people pivoting too often without having a soundbite from consumers or some type of check and also asking themselves, okay, this is great, but do I need to do it now?
Well, Rich, thank you for joining us. We're super excited to talk to you.
I'm happy to be here.
I connected with you really through SKU, which is, so if anyone doesn't know SKU, it's the, I guess they could say like the largest or the leading consumer products accelerator. It's really an incubator for emerging brands to level up and get mentoring and get access to capital and connections and all those things. And I've been a mentor before, but you are a returning mentor for SKU. Maybe, is this your third track now that you're doing?
It is. Yes. I love it.
Fantastic. Well, we'll talk a little bit about that because I love that you do that. And I think it's admirable and just a great way to support, brands that don't have the connections and don't have access to all the knowledge. So let me just start with kind of your background. So you describe yourself as a classically trained CPG marketer, which I love. What kind of attracted you to this category in the first place? That's part A. And then what keeps you here?
Well, I call myself a classically trained marketer because I went to school for, I did my undergrad in marketing at the University of Miami. And then I went and got an MBA in marketing and international business. And that's actually where my career ended up at. Oftentimes people figure out later in life that marketing is their passion, right? And they pivot, which is awesome. I'm one of those lucky few that fell in love with marketing at Marketing 101 in college. I was originally going into School of Architecture. And I interned for an architect, and I realized that the romantic dream that I had of what architecture was and the reality was not matching. I started as undeclared art and sciences, and out of, I guess, luck and rolling the dice, I said, let's try marketing. And I fell in love with Marketing 101, and I never looked back. I landed an internship at PepsiCo in Latin America. When I was doing my MBA. And honestly, what kept me there and what really fueled me is the exciting work environment. I was in the insights team, and one day we were developing testing protocols. The next day I was figuring out how to do product shipments. I almost ended up on a flight to Venezuela because we had a rush to do a product. And next thing I knew, I was seconds before the HR director said, no, we can't fly an intern. They're not even our insurance. Are you crazy? No. But it was those early days of figuring out, solving problems and creating new ways of doing things and innovations that really fueled me. Since then.
Rich, were you looking to go work internationally, or was that an opportunity that presented itself and you just went for it? Or was that on your radar when you were going through school?
Yeah. Funny you should say that. I remember I had a mentor at the time, I guess he was a second year in business school, and I told him that I wanted to do international work. And he said, no, you do that later on in your career. You're supposed to be a seasoned executive domestically, and then they send you internationally. But I said, no, hold my beer. Hang on. Because Miami is such an international hub, there's so many international jobs here. And funny enough, one of my competitive advantages going in was that I was a native English speaker. I was amongst a group of executives who had raised the ranks through Latin America, and I brought English fluency. And at one moment I was like, wait, I got an MBA to speak in English? Hang on. But it was a very valuable resource to the team, and I was the one reviewing the presentations that were going to the C-suite from Latin America. So it was a very cool, and it was a wonderful training ground because I was at least a decade younger than anybody else on the team. So I learned so quickly. I had so many mentors along the way that I could learn from. So it was a fantastic experience. To your question, what's kept me? Well, first, no 2 days are the same. There's always a different challenge, a different consumer, a different brand, a different medium. I've always looked for wildly different complementary experiences throughout my career. So as I mentioned, I started in LATAM after 8 years of LATAM, where it started feeling a little similar. I jumped to corporate at PepsiCo, and I worked on a totally different geography. I worked on the expansion of energy drinks as well as the front end innovation of energy drinks for a couple of years. And then again, I did another career pivot to another corner of PepsiCo, which was a PepsiCo Batch Venture, which was a direct-to-consumer business that only existed in a PowerPoint. Very, very different experience. And
Mm-hmm.
after 5 years of bringing this thing from PowerPoint all the way through year two of commercialization, I took another jump and I went to the other side of the PepsiCo house, which is Frito-Lay, the food division, where I worked for nearly 5 years.
I love that. I love that perspective on career growth. Something worth noting as well. Just that's unique. It's not necessarily the traditional view of how some people think about growing their careers. It's not a straight line, though, is the point. And following your
Absolutely.
curiosity is what I take away from what you shared. So that's interesting perspective. Which, to build on where you left your story off, you ended up being at PepsiCo for 14 years. And
Mhm.
what I'd love to understand, this is a two-part question. What are a few best practices, just marketing, 101 that you learned there that you still apply to what you're doing today? And then on the opposite side, what are a few things you've had to shed or evolve your thinking around as you work with different brands of different shapes and sizes?
So the first thing that I would say is that any large CPG company is masters of marketing. There's frameworks, there's strategies, there's processes in order to make sure that what you are taking to market for millions of consumers is the most efficient, the best possible iteration of itself. The thing that I would say that I take with me the most is how to plan strategically, starting from where do you want to be in 3 years, breaking that down to how do you do that yearly, and then how do you do that quarterly, and even shorter term. Understanding the right KPIs to track, the KPIs that matter, and how to listen to the consumer would be those things that I would tell you are the key things that I've taken and will always have with me. Conversely, to your two-part question, the things that I've had to shed, I would say that the main thing that I've had to shed is speed. In larger corporations, things move at a different pace. And the higher you go, the larger the market, the bigger the business that you're in, the tougher it is to turn the ship quickly. And really, like that's less of a skill. I was fortunate enough to work in that PepsiCo-backed venture, which would turn on a dime. So I learned that skill within my time there. But today, working with smaller entrepreneurial ventures, it's understanding what information you need in order to make the right decision, and constantly keeping a finger on the pulse and understand when you have to pivot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see that being a big one. I hear about and see all the time these new beverage brands. I mean, beverage, you've worked in food as well, but let's just talk beverages for a second.
Sure.
When there's a new one coming in and they're trying to infiltrate the market, and I look at it with such admiration, but also exhaustion, because I'm like, I know I have a really good sense of what's ahead and how much work they have to do when you consider everything from packaging to pricing strategy to distribution to just shelf space. I mean, they're not adding shelf space, right? So it's really, really competitive and saturated. What are some things that you see that are reoccurring mistakes, no matter how many times you might warn somebody about it, but it's like people just kind of keep walking into it, or just some of the landmines, I guess, as you're looking to scale in the beverage category?
So I think the first one that oftentimes I see is smaller brands have never actually talked to a consumer. And I realize that insights can be expensive, but there are ways to do it less expensively. And I was fortunate enough to start my career in insights, so I understand the value of having that knowledge, that insight, if you will, to base your decisions on. Oftentimes, brands do a lot of things from the gut, and they take decisions, important, like pivotal decisions, without at least doing some type of quick, like even a survey monkey, right? We have these very economical insights tools these days where they could source consumers for you, or they can help you just do a gut check, because at the end of the day, we're not the consumer. That's another one of the big mistakes sometimes. People believe that
So let me just ask you on that one specifically, why do you think it is? You kind of alluded to it, like, I guess there's a perception of it being too expensive. It's going to slow things down. People are just trusting of their own instincts, but like that does seem like a big deal. It's a really big one. Why is this routinely ignored?
My sense is that people they don't think about it. They don't have it top of mind. And it would be easier just to keep running as fast as you can, especially when you feel the pressure of the market. You feel the pressure of sales. You say a good enough package is better than no package, but a better package is better than a good enough package. Doing key questions that are critical in fast moving consumer goods, particularly packaging, because it's your most expensive media out there. It's the one that you print over and over again, and it's the face of your brand when you go to the shelf with a competitive set, to your point. Making sure that you've tested and you make sure that the hierarchy is right, that people can, the findability on shelf, understand why people would pick your competitor over you, and conversely, how you can distinguish yourself from that, are all very critical questions. I think that the second thing that I've seen entrepreneurs and smaller brands do is fall into the trap of wanting to change because they think that they have to change things. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And sometimes you see people pivoting too often without having a soundbite from consumers or some type of check, and also asking themselves, okay, this is great, but do I need to do it now?
Is that a case of getting bored, or what do you see there is why that's happening?
I think it is. I think there's endless possibilities in the world, so why not chase them sometimes?
It's very intoxicating to go just try something else, right?
Yeah, but when you're building something, you're building brick by brick. I saw, I won't name names, but a reusable water brand. I saw they just went through a rebrand, and the founder was posting on LinkedIn that they were very proud of this rebrand. And I just asked myself, I was like, what was wrong with your previous brand? It was people recognize that the look and feel already. You were already building equity there. Was it really necessary at this point? Were consumers really telling you your logo is the reason I'm not buying you? Having both sides of that equation on the scales to figure out if it's the right time to change something, to evolve something.
Yeah, and that's costly. These are costly decisions, right?
Yeah, and especially if it's costly. I was talking to another entrepreneur that wanted to pivot their brand's positioning, change something in their formulation, and they thought that it would appeal more to consumers. I said, cool, maybe, but can you ask consumers first before you make this huge, costly pivot? You've already started building something here. Maybe you're right. Maybe there are more fish over here, but why don't you check it first before you dive head first into this other pond?
Yeah, we've seen it firsthand. I mean, we've worked with brands that have changed their ingredients panel without a lot of consumer insights, and the backlash was so massive. It actually turned out to be a lot of consumer research for free very quickly, but it also was a bit of
it's painful learnings. Yeah,
it was a bit of a shitstorm. But getting through that, I think to the other side was great, because they did learn what their biggest advocates want, and so that was really good. But getting there probably wasn't the smoothest way to do it. Yeah. This episode of Listen Loudly is brought to you by Door Number 3, a growth marketing firm for challenger brands. Door Number 3 works with scale-up and enterprise-level brands who have a mandate to grow. We help them shift from accidental to intentional growth through performance media and brand development. If you need a growth strategy and execution partner, visit dm3austin.com or give us a call. We look forward to talking to you.
To Prentice's point, you get the information through trial and error. Sometimes you get the free research because of a mistake. And so my next question is building on that, is what is your favorite mistake? So I'm curious to know a business mistake that led to a big learning for you that ultimately became a positive outcome in the long run.
So I can think of two. One is thankfully one that I was not involved with, but I did watch when Tropicana changed their branding and then very swiftly had to change that back. That's very much a story similar to what Prentice was mentioning. At the time, I was overseeing marketing in the Caribbean, where there was a big Tropicana following, and just like in the US, we had the same backlash, and the company did do the right thing ultimately by going back to the straw and orange package. The second, I guess, mistake that I would tell you about is this one. I was responsible for it. Is, I guess, the lesson is validating your theories early. So I talked a little bit about being on a PepsiCo venture. It was in the beyond the bottle space. The guy that I worked for had come up with a technology to put the essence of a beverage into a small pod. And then you take that pod and you pop it on a bottle to make a regular strength beverage. The initial hypothesis was we needed to create a standalone brand, and the hypothesis was we needed to create as many flavor variants, category variants as possible in order for consumers to adopt that reusable water bottle. I was leading innovation at the time. I went down the rabbit hole of creating a bunch of, from coffee pods to energizing pods and everything in between. And in isolation, they tested well. But it wasn't until we started selling the product and doing consumer surveys that we learned that the main benefit of a water bottle like this was replacing plain water usage. So there's a lot of consumers that hate plain water. They just can't stand the taste of plain water. And we were really helping them increase their hydration. Then that's when we pivoted very quickly towards being all about hydration and supporting people in hydration. And that's why today that technology is known as GX, and it sits with the Gatorade brand at PepsiCo, which is the king of hydration.
Interesting. I remember it was maybe it was a year ago. It's one of those back to school shopping trips to Target, and one of my daughters said, "Can I get a water bottle?" Of course, I'm a good dad. You can get a water bottle. Yes. But she came out with a water bottle that was one of those pod deals. I'm like, oh, we just signed up for, we just signed up for the subscription model. I was so, whatever. It wasn't the biggest deal in the world, but I was like, man, that is, they got us. They got us good.
You're welcome.
Yeah. But she's really, thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Rich. But she's really hydrated. So her skin is glowing, and we thank you for that. So that's awesome. That's really interesting. Yeah. And so you say Gatorade in that space is just totally dominating now?
Yeah. I mean, Gatorade has always stood for hydrating better than water. Yeah. So it made all the sense.
So, okay. All this great experience, PepsiCo, big brands, lots of resources. Then you're a mentor at SKU, which at the top of the conversation I was mentioning is like a CPG accelerator. So you're a mentor for emerging brands, really startups, early stage brands that are trying to scale and figure out a lot very quickly. And I find that sometimes, mentors come in with all this great big experience, and then you get on the call with the founder of like a ready to drink beverage brand or a cocktail brand or something, which is one that went through a couple tracks ago. And they're just trying to figure out like some really, really basic blocking and tackling, and don't necessarily have the funds or the resources to get it done. So like, what's my content strategy in social media? Oh, and by the way, I'm the founder. I'm the one that does sales. I'm also the social media guy, right? So how do you kind of think about supporting these emerging brands? What brings you back time and time again where you feel like you could add value? And I guess part of that question is like, how are you able to add value when a lot of your experience is just being surrounded by a lot of resources?
That's a great question. So I'll tell you two things. First thing is what took me to SKU in the first place when I was a PepsiCo and Frito-Lay employee. And that was the possibility of getting out of the ivory tower. When you are a marketer at a large CPG company, you're kind of stuck in this ivory tower, right? I was responsible for $1 billion of retail sales of better for you snacks, but I wanted to get my hands dirty. I wanted to be on the ground. I wanted to, and go back to, if you will, the days at the PepsiCo venture. That's SKU allowed me to do that very quickly. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden I was definitely on the ground floor. It was very interesting and complementary to the experience that I was having at my day job. It's also obviously very rewarding to give back. But the beauty of SKU is that you learn as much as you teach, because you're surrounded by other mentors from other areas and other functions. And sometimes you have marketers and you will disagree with a marketer. Funny story, my first round, I was in the same mentoring group. I was responsible for Smart Food Popcorn, largest popcorn brand in the US. And I was in the same group as the VP from Amplify, who had a competing popcorn product. So we would share stories, but we'd also know that we were frenemies. And so it was very cautionary, the information. But it was also very interesting to hear how he would think, what advice he would give. And sometimes we'd agree to disagree. That sometimes happens. No, it was a great experience. And today I love working with Amia, which is the first migraine-friendly foods. This guy has created a bar which is free, trigger-free, some of the most common allergens out there. He started selling last year, and it's so exciting to be on the ground floor with him and understand his challenges. And we have a great mentor group advising him.
You said migraine-friendly, right?
Yes.
Okay, because when you said it, I thought you said migrant-friendly, and I was like, that's a big concept. How are they doing that?
I know, my head
was... migraine.
Migraine. Okay, I mean that's still interesting, but okay. So migraine friendly, and so this is obviously with any product like this, it's trying to solve a problem, right? I guess there's a gap in the marketplace there. Yeah,
and he's realized it wants to be the gluten-free of migraines, if you will. How do you create a brand for a captive audience, an audience that is looking for solutions out there every day a bit more, without finding them, particularly for on-the-go snacks?
Interesting. Okay. That's illuminating because I didn't realize there's a big market, obviously a big market for that. And when you think about guiding them through, there's a lot that comes up on these phone calls when you're working with these brands, like positioning and sales and distribution. How do you help them kind of stack rank, like in terms of where to prioritize
Yeah.
at any given time?
That's I would say one of the biggest values of a mentor group for any startup is keeping you honest, keeping you accountable, and making sure that you're not taking on more than you need to at any given point. Because to us, what we were talking about earlier, oftentimes it gets to the point where the entrepreneur wants to do this and pivot more often than they need to, or it's making sure that you've got your top three priorities and you remind them every mentor call, hey, these are 1, 2, 3. This is what we were working on, right? I worked with another mentee previously in a different program. Every other call, there was I got this great opportunity to go do this thing over there. And it's like, no. You said, remember, 1, 2, 3 were your geographies. Is that in 1, 2, or 3? Then no. I know that it's tempting because you want the sales, but it's just, there's an opportunity cost to do this.
That's really good guidance. And I think that there's so much truth in that. There's always the shiny object to go chase, right? But you got to do the blocking and tackling and get those things done right and get into a rhythm of those things before. Yeah.
And I get it, because when you're in it day to day, you don't see it as clearly as a mentor that comes in and sees it from the cheap seats, if you will, and can give you a broader perspective of, no, hang on. The strategy, we said we're going this way. This isn't going this way. So
I'd love to know, how have you seen the CMO role evolve throughout the years, and what skills are now more important than ever that weren't, when you entered marketing right out of college?
I would say the CMO used to be an artist and is now a scientist. It used to be where it was a lot of gut, it was a lot of feeling, it was a lot of just leveraging your large monolith agency for the big brand idea that you would do and launch a campaign that would run for 3 to 4 months. You would track the GRPs on TV, and then you'd get a brand, the equivalent of a brand lift study 3 months later, and then you'd do it all over again, and you'd have that information ready for the next year's campaign. It's shifted drastically towards having real-time data. It's very much a analytics, a KPI game, and understanding which of these KPIs are the most important ones. Just because you can measure it doesn't mean it's important necessarily. And conversely, there are certain metrics that those are the key ones. To the point of the startups, oftentimes we see startups that are obsessed with growing distribution, which is great, but only when your units per store per week are high. So just because you can put your product on an additional shelf doesn't mean that you should necessarily at this point, unless you can support it properly, unless it's in the right store for the right demographic. It might actually hurt you versus helping you. So making sure that you understand which KPIs are the key ones at this point is what is important. And then last thing that I would say about the CMO role is, it's gone are the days of a campaign that you would send off to the agency. The agency would come back and present 3 ideas, and then you'd pick one, and then one would get made, right? Marketing is moving way more at the pace of culture, and that's exciting to me.
Yeah, that is so true. Yeah, and the work is, I don't want to say disposable, but it has a much quicker shelf life. So it's not something that has to go live out there for 3 months. It's like, it's going to be out there for a little bit, and test it, move on to the next thing. So yeah, it's really, really interesting points. So what's coming up for you that you're inspired about in your world that you're looking forward to?
So a couple of things. One is AI. AI is obviously, it's here. It's going to be a tool. It is a tool. It's only getting smarter. It's only getting better. So learning and leveraging it to be the best marketer is key. I would say, to the point of faster response, I think we have to be agile and ready to turn on a dime. A good example of one of the last things that I did at Frito-Lay was when Lionel Messi came to the US. The guy that I was working for, Chris Bellinger, very bright, creative, said, "Oh my God, we need around 807 goats in the shape of the face of Messi, because he has made 807 goals. And we need to celebrate the fact that he's coming to the US with Lay's, because he was a Lay's property, which is all fine and dandy. But we wanted to do this in time for his first game, which was in less than 3 weeks. We all thought, first, you're crazy. Second, this is a really good idea. And so we went on this crazy sprint and we pulled it off in less than 3 weeks. From idea to execution, created this video that was posted on Lay's channels and got amazing engagement.
That is cool. Isn't that fun? That's really a great story. So when you think about AI, are there things that you're leaning into a little bit now, specifically tools or anything you're experimenting with or just got your eye on right now?
Probably not unlike other large corporations. PepsiCo is very cautious of which AI tools we could use, because depending on what you put in there, you could be giving away trade secrets, right? So it was a very don't use that. Don't do that. Don't touch it at the time. But now it's fair game for me, experimenting with all of them, and I'm understanding all of it. I was playing with Gamma the other day, which is like it can create whole presentations for you out of just prompts. Like, oh my God, what? Or a website. It's fascinating to understand and see all the different tools that are out there.
Absolutely. Well, look, we appreciate the time. Get on and hear your story and chat. Thank you, Rich. Appreciate you coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.